We start with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, emerging from years of turmoil and scandal that impaired its ability to protect the nation's fourth largest county. It all came to a head a year ago. The late Alistair Adele stepped down as county attorney. Career prosecutor and top deputy Rachel Mitchell was appointed to take her place. Mitchell won the post outright in the November election. Joining us now to report back on her progress over the last year is Maricopa County Attorney Rachel Mitchell. Welcome back to Square Off.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
As I said, you inherited a mess when you took office. Prosecutors leaving, cases going uncharged. One prosecutor, whom you fired, was allowed to bring phony felony charges against Black Lives Matter protesters. In short, the office's reputation was in tatters. I think that's a fair statement. So how's the rebuild going?
It's going extremely well. The foundational piece, of course, was to get it back up to the numbers that we needed to. So we went from a 20% deficit in personnel. We are now in the single digits percentage-wise of a deficit, and that's enabled us to do what we need to do. But I've also been really focused on improving the reputation in the community. I've been going out, I've been meeting with the towns and cities, I've been meeting with community groups, and I've reestablished relationships with the police.
What interests me in the numbers you've posted, talked about, they're online, as well as not what they are, but how you got there. And what priorities did you change, did you have to change in order to bring down those high numbers, high unchecked caseload numbers, submittal numbers, to bring them down? What priorities did you set that may have been different from the past?
Well, you know, we look at a research-based model for prosecution. So in cases where people have addictions or they're committing property crimes related to the addictions, we want to get them into a diversion program so that they can get help as opposed to face a felony on their record. And that enables us to focus on serious offenses. Gun-related crimes, for example, has been a priority for me. And so that, along with getting the staffing levels up, has enabled us to do that.
You've been in that office 30 years. How have charging decisions, the approach to cases, changed in that time to where you are today?
I think it's changed from county attorney to county attorney. I know that some county attorneys look at it as more of a formula based on the sentencing structure. I'm very research-based oriented, so I'm going to look at what are the risk factors, and let's look at each individual case, each individual, and do the right thing in those types of cases.
How about the use of plea deals? Because for quite a while there, the county attorney's office was notorious for using plea deals to get things done and maybe force people into guilty pleas. What's your view of them? You know,
plea bargains are a necessity of the criminal justice system. We don't go to trial on 100% of the cases. We go to trial on maybe 1 to 2% of the cases. That's just a reality everywhere. But that doesn't mean you use charges to force people into plea bargains that they didn't do. So we want to charge appropriately. I also don't believe in what I call top-down plea bargaining, where you say, well, here's what I can get at trial, so I'm going to knock a few years off, and that's the offer. What I do is I start at basically ground zero and say, what does this case call for?
I want to go back to that Black Lives Matter case I mentioned. Can you tell the folks who pay your salary, pay your prosecutor salaries, that the culture that spawned those phony charges is now gone? It's eradicated, does not exist anymore in your office?
You know, I've always known that leadership is important. I never understood how important it was until there was none. And what you had there was a situation, and not to be disrespectful of Miss Adele, she had a personal problem, but you have to be there as a leader, and you have to be giving oversight and vision, and I've done that. I have clearly communicated my values, and that we are not going to engage in that type of just unfettered behavior. And that, you know, I want to be clear, the majority of people in that office are hardworking, decent citizens of this community. That was a misguided attempt at best, and it's not acceptable.
Since you know the data, I'm sure you know that Arizona has one of the highest incarceration rates in the country. Maricopa County, as the largest county, is responsible for many of those prisoners and inmates, jail inmates. What does that incarceration rate tell you about our criminal justice system and maybe where it needs to be reformed?
I think you need to look at, in criminal justice issues, you have to look at individual cases, not just overall numbers. And so what I'm focused on as the county attorney is to make sure that we're doing the right thing in each individual case. If the person warrants prison, then we're going to put them in prison. If, on the other hand, we can divert them, and I've expanded the diversion opportunities so that people can avoid felony prosecution and get, for example, treatment, we're going to do that. And that should then, if you look at the individuals that are in prison, it's the appropriate individuals.
Is that, though, the result of mandatory minimums and the sentencing guidelines set by the legislature that maybe were or are too harsh?
I don't think they're too harsh. I think you have to look at the situation. You have to look at socioeconomic factors. You have to look at the fact that we're a border state. And so, for example, it's no exaggeration to say that Maricopa County is ground zero for fentanyl right now. And fentanyl, yes, it can fuel property crimes, but it can also fuel violent crimes. And so we have to respond to that.
I want to end with some stories in the news. Last year, you supported Kaylees law. It was named for sexual assault victim Kaylee Kozak. It allows victims of dangerous crimes, including sex crimes, to obtain what amounts to a lifetime restraining order against their assailant. And you supported that law.
Yes.
2 weeks ago, Governor Katie Hobbs vetoed a new bill backed by Kaylee Kozak that would have required convicted sex offenders to report themselves to a child's school. I don't believe you said anything about that law. Do you support, or that bill? Do you support that? Do you support that, or do you support the veto?
We did support it by answering questions of the legislators. We were not the driving force behind that bill. I understand why there were some issues with the bill because it stopped short of saying what to do with that information. So, for example, it said you have to report yourself to the school administration, but then it didn't direct the school administration what to do with that. And I think that drove some concerns for people. But I certainly understand the concern behind it. I mean, I spent 25 years as a prosecutor protecting kids. I want kids to be safe from sex offenders.
So do you support that veto?
I think there are better ways to go about doing what was trying to be accomplished there. No, I wish she had signed the bill. There were other bills that I wish she had signed too, but I think there are still better ways to go about that bill.
Okay, I want to end with the death penalty. You went to court to challenge Governor Katie Hobbs' refusal to enforce the death penalty against murder convict Aaron Gunchus. Given court rulings, is that challenge now effectively over?
No, we're actually still set for court hearing in May. The issue is whether it is possible under the current situation for them to carry out an execution, and we are still asking the courts to order the governor to enforce the law.
Judge said he's pretty skeptical of your chances of success, though.
Well, he's giving us a chance to make our case, so we're going to do that.
Okay, real quick, you're going to run for re-election in 24?
I am.
All right, there it is. Rachel Mitchell, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.